What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of Philosophical Differences. Brenden Schaeffer, Josh Jacobs of the Deal in the Cards podcast, talking some Cardinals baseball on this Friday, as we do every Friday. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on this YouTube channel and check out Deal in the Cards as well. Josh, I begin with this. Cardinals had a tough week. Cincinnati series didn't go great. They're below 500. Here we be. Josh, Cardinals, thoughts? Question mark? Because I don't know how else to ask about this team right now other than just thoughts.
I don't want to talk about it. No, honestly, I'm kind of like, it's bad. I mean, I think people usually think I'm one of the more optimistic people when it comes to the Cardinals, and I got nothing.
Yeah, that's why this is going to be fun because I think I am that way generally, if only because I read my YouTube comments and they tell me that I'm Ollie's boy and all this stuff. So, like, if that's true, I must be on the end of the spectrum that's too optimistic about the team relative to what a lot of fans would like me to be. So if that's the case, you and I getting together, talking about this team at this moment could be interesting. Yeah. I mean, what do you, anything? You got anything? I don't even have a question.
The only, I promise I'm going to be mostly pessimistic. The only sliver of hope is that I think it was a little bit worse on my 11th, and they somehow turned it around. There was no reason to believe that it was going to be any better, and they did. But maybe you could argue that it's like, hey, they turned it around and fell back into this hole. So is that worse than starting in it? Like, sure, you could argue that. And I wouldn't argue against you right now. I mean, May 11th, I was like, the season's dead. They're done.
They were 15-24. I just pulled up the standings. They had lost 7 in a row. Right now, they've only lost 4 in a row.
But they could easily lose 7 in a row after the LA series. So.
Oh, that's right. They play the Dodgers tonight. That's special. Here's what I think about the upcoming schedule. I honestly think couldn't be better. Couldn't be a better situation. Maybe not for the team's ability to make the playoffs, but also it's like you can't be fooled into thinking, oh, well, we have the Pirates coming up and you just are going to have to do it. If you're going to be the team that you said you were, you're going to have to do it against a schedule that is indicative of the types of teams you hope to get the right to face in October. Yeah. There will be no question after the next 3 weeks. When you look at the Cardinals schedule between now and that series right after Labor Day against Milwaukee, that is like the 3-week stretch to me that says, oh, like, bring it on. Like that, their backs are against the wall. They have to know it at this point. Yeah. I almost think the scheduling couldn't be any better because if they go and I don't know the exact number of games, but if they go and they have a 400 winning percentage over this stretch, there'll be several games below 500 for the year. And we'll go, oh, it wasn't meant to be. And I get it. Like the late September schedule is kind of easier. And so you could even delude yourself at that point into thinking, oh, what if they against a good schedule, they're going to have to play their best baseball. They're going to have to grind out series wins one after another. And if they do that, then I think they salvage their season. Has there been anything that we've seen from this team, especially in that Cincy series, that indicates they're about to do that? No. I mean, they're not. They're getting out hit. Ollie Marmol said it. They were outslugged by the Reds, and that is putting it kindly. The Reds did the types of things at the plate that win you baseball games. They hit home runs in a ballpark that's conducive to it. The Cardinals got to play there too. They got to play those same 3 games in that same ballpark, and they did not hit for power. Arenado had 1. Yeah. Right? Like they didn't pitch that well. I mean, Kyle Gibson was giving up the home runs. Sonny Gray gave up some home runs. They were outplayed in every facet. And then even some of the little things that we talk about, the Cardinals need to be good at the little things because they're not great at outslugging teams. They're going to have to do the little things well. Have some errors sprinkled in, little things like that. They were outplayed in every facet of the game. They're not going to be able to play that way against the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Padres and all these teams that they have coming up. I guess the one thing you could say, and look, the people listening to this are not, I think most people think that ship has sailed. And like today, would I predict the Cardinals to make the playoffs? No. May 11th, I said, well, actually, it was whatever day, I think May 6th or so, whenever Wilson Contreras got injured, I said that was the first day that I was like, I think I'm below 50%. If you ask me, it's not quite a coin flip. I think they're probably going to miss. And then they went on a run, they fixed it. And I was, for the longest time, I'm like, yeah, they're going to find a way in the playoffs. As of today, I'm slinking back to that other side. But it's like it's such a jarring thing to have happen at Cincinnati that maybe it was the only thing that could happen is like, okay, it couldn't get worse from here. And if it does, we're just not who we thought we were.
Yeah.
They have to completely have that be their wake-up call. Is the talent on the team enough to have that mean anything? I don't know. We're going to find that. The beauty of this sport is we're going to find out. You get to play it for 6 months. You know the team you are by the end. There will be no excuses. There will be no goalposts being moved. There will be no, because here's what could happen. The next month, let's say, you could have 2 starting pitchers go down to injury. But that's not going to allow John Mozeliak at the end of the season to say, well, we had some injuries. No. The goalpost won't be moved. There's a simplicity and a beauty in that to me, that we know what's at stake. We know exactly where they are now, and it's not a good spot. There's no sunshine and roses you could put on this team right now at 60 and 61. You just got swept by the Reds. So I think everybody's clear about where they're at, and the beauty of it is they do have 41 games left to be played. We're going to get to know where they're going, and there will be no pretense or we worked hard and we tried hard, or the coaches are doing. That's it. All those things are true and well and good, but all that's going to matter is, can you win 10 more games than you lose for the rest of the season, which is like a 105 win pace or whatever it would have to be.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. It's a hard thing to do, but it's so simple that evaluating it now and analyzing it feels really easy, because there's no other option. It's just, you do this or you don't make the playoffs, and therefore you weren't the team that you told everybody that you were. Period.
Yeah. Period. And the next 22 straight games are against the Dodgers, the Brewers, the Twins, the Padres, the Yankees, the Brewers, and the Mariners. Like, they're so if they manage to go over 500 in that stretch, then I think you could be like, hey, like, are they going to make the playoffs? We don't know, but if you're going above 500 in that stretch, it's impressive to say the least, at least. And I think if you look at the NL wildcard standings right now, I think everyone except for the Padres are below 500 against teams with a 500 or higher record. So like you'd at least be like, okay, they're in the mix at that point. But do I see them doing that? No, I see them getting their butt whooped for the next month. And then at that point, it's very clear what direction they're going. I was just looking at the standings, and if they have a horrid stretch over the next 22, they're probably closer to a top 5 pick than they are a playoff spot at this point.
Hey, there you go.
Which is just wild to think about. And I'm not like saying they need to start going tank mode, but like that's how much this can teeter.
You're the optimist. You're the optimist, and that's the way you're going to have to flip your optimism. Is, hey, that draft
Ethan Holiday, right? Like go get the top
that
guy. Yeah, that's where our conversations might be going here soon. But I think if this was 2023, like if this, like last year, I know people wanted the change to happen, but you kind of like, I get why the DeWitts gave them a little bit of the doubt that for the most part, they've been able to put a winning product on the field. You get a 40 year like this, but you can't do it 2 years in a row. And it doesn't matter what the excuses are. And if I'm looking, I wrote about it recently, like the pitching, it's been about what they wanted it to be. I know it's struggled as of late, but the formula they kind of came into the season with is lockdown bullpen, a rotation that keeps you in games, and our offense is going to be good enough to win it. And it's the offense that's let them down. And is that I don't blame John Mozeliak as much for that, but there's systemic issues that have helped lead to this that I think he has to own. And then there's a lot of other issues that at this point, like the offense was supposed to be able to cover up a multitude of sins for them, and it hasn't. If anything, it's been the worst part of their team so far. And I found this the other day. They're the 13th worst team since 1924. So 1,438 teams have played since 1924 in
I don't
OPS.
even care. I was going to say, I don't even care what the stat is. I'm already not pleased.
OPS with runners in scoring position. They're the 14th worst out of 1,438 teams since 1924. They are 90. There's 99.1% of teams that have played since 1924 have a better OPS with runners in scoring position.
And so
than this Cardinals lineup.
I try to be fair. I try to have respect for how difficult this job is to not only play Major League Baseball, but like the pressure on the coaches, and I try to keep all that in context. You can work really, really hard. If that's the result of your team, the person that's coaching the hitters to do well probably needs to be evaluated. And I am not anti-Turner Ward. I am generally the guy that's like, you know what? I hope things go well so that we don't have to talk about the hitting coach, because sometimes I feel like that's a scapegoat. But if that stat is a stat, the players you got to figure out. The notion of, well, you can't trade 9 players and have a completely different lineup is true. But also, if the coaches are there, they have to be there to do something. They're being paid to do something.
Yep.
They're not executing in the area that I would assign to hitting coach. And that is not me making an indictment on the work that he puts in or his staff puts in. Results. I mean, how often do we talk about baseball being a business? And it's a results-oriented business. And the result that you just read off with that stat is jarring. It's alarming. I don't even care who your players are. You can be a team that is closer to White Sox than you are Dodgers as far as your lineup and your group of players that you have. That would still be figuring it out a little bit, right? When it comes to clutch hitting, and that's how you produce runs. The Cardinals have veteran players that some are being paid, right? They have young players. This whole notion last year, like, well, we're a young team, and we kind of side-eye that and go, really, are you? Yeah. There are some young players, but the young players we're talking about are year 3 guys at this point. Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman, like, Walker's year 2. You've got your young player is Mason Wynn. That's technically a rookie still, and he's doing fine. So, Burleson is, these guys are young, sure, but that should almost be used as a positive of time to all take the next step. And largely they haven't to this point. It's been Burleson. Maybe we've talked about this, a little above expectation. Mason Wynn, same thing. Donovan is maybe a little below, but not jarringly so. But outside of that, Walker, Gorman, Nootbaar for sure is like, well, they're not getting the production. Not only did they not get like that next step from any of them, they didn't get them to match what they did last year. If those guys are matching what they did last year, and these aren't young guys, but Goldie and Arenado, same thing. If those guys are matching what they did last year, or even doing 95% of what they each did last year, the Cardinals are leading the division. Like, that it's a 5 or 6 pack of guys that have decreased their productivity by 20, 30, 40, 50%. And that is where you are. Because as you said, I think the starting pitching, as much as like now we look at it, their ERA from starters is 4.56. That's not good enough, but that's a recent development where the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit on some of these guys. For sure. Kyle Gibson alone added a lot to that, not yesterday, but 2 days ago. And that's 4.56 ranks 24th in baseball. That's not, but generally speaking, the rotation was supposed to rank 19th in ERA. The bullpen was supposed to rank 8th or 9th in ERA like they are right now. And the offense was supposed to be a top 10 offense in OPS and run score and all those categories that would have made the puzzle fit together. And the offense is not that offense. They're not that team in run scored. They're bottom 10 in most offensive categories, and they are historically bad in terms of with RISP, which is probably the one category that if I could have the genie come out of the bottle and say, hey, you can pick one stat for your baseball team to be good at offensively. I'm like, just let him hit in the clutch. Let him be good with RISP. And then you're the Royals this year, because the Royals have had their offense is okay, but they, at least I'd have to check up more recently, but they, with runners in scoring position, were doing some things that they were like, 2013 Alan Craig with runners in scoring position. And you're like, hey, this can it be sustained? Is it something that's going to last all year? Who knows? But for a while it's going, you're going to win a lot more baseball games because of your ability to come through. Hey, if you don't get that many hits, that's one thing. Get them when they count. That's something that can end up leading to very, very good success. And the Royals still, I just looked it up, they have an 851 OPS with RISP. That leads baseball by eight OPS points. They are hitting 302 with, this is the Royals we're talking about. They're hitting 302, which I would say, people say batting average is not everything. The one time I actually want to look at average almost more than OPS is with RISP. Because unless your base running is bad, which we've seen it happen, Cardinals get a hit and they don't score from second. But average is almost what you were looking for with RISP, because it's called runners in scoring position for a reason. They're hitting 302. Second best in baseball is 281 with RISP. The Cardinals are hitting 228, and their OPS with RISP is down at 633, which is second from the bottom of it. I mean,
their average is 44th worst of all time with runners in scoring position since 1924. So if you want to go the average route, it doesn't help you out.
In that, average is, in fairness with that, it's like average is down across baseball. I get that. Yeah. But you're comping relative to the rest of the baseball right now. There's only a handful of teams that you're in the muck with when it comes to average, and then OPS, which is going to encompass every little thing. It's you and the White Sox at the bottom. So like that's the difference. We can look at your overall numbers, and those aren't good either from the Cardinals. Their OPS is 20th, tied for 20th. And their average is actually probably not that bad at this point overall. 246 gets, this is going to sound ridiculous. Their average is 246. That's 13th.
Yeah.
Their batting averages, and that's as good of an example of why batting average doesn't matter as you could possibly find. Is like, do you think this Cardinals offense has been a good one this year? No. And yet batting average, they're like, okay, but what do? They get a knock, they might get another one, and then they leave everybody stranded. That's the worst combination you can be. It's not, that's how you end up 24th, tied right now for 24th with the Pirates in runs scored. They're the anti-Royals this year because the Royals, they're 12th in OPS. That's not, outrageously great, but when it counts, they're doing it. And now you're seeing them 10 games above 500 or whatever they are, and the Cardinals are where they are.
Yeah. And I mean, if you go back to this offseason, I know there were people who were waving the warning flags about the offense. And I get there was like the second half, it fell off. But I was inclined to believe that a healthy team that was trying to contend was a top 10 unit in baseball before they waved the white flag at the deadline. Donovan got hurt. So I chose to believe that side of the narrative. So there are people that were skeptical of the offense. It's not like everyone was bought in. But I'm also like, I just don't see any, unless sometimes people throw out there the absolutes and like, this is going to be the worst lineup ever. And it's like, okay, you don't really have anything to back it up, but sure, you can say you were right on that one, even though I don't see any reason to believe that.
The people who are skeptical are right, but like for maybe the wrong reasons.
Yeah, the depths of the struggles, I don't think anyone could have pointed to. And to go to Turner Ward here, it's, again, I don't know. I can't speak to his job performance other than what you see on the field, right? And
all we get. That's all we get to see.
Yeah, that's all we get to see. And Alec Burleson and Mason Wynn are two newer players to the team. And maybe you could say, hey, they're still benefiting from the instruction that they've gotten in most recently from AAA in the minor leagues. Maybe, but then you see the guys who've been up for a while, for the 3 to 4 years, or the veterans, all of them have fallen off. All of them. It's just like Wilson Contreras had a great second half last year. He's fallen off a little bit in the second half. He's been great. Burleson's been great. Wynn's been really good. Gorman, Nootbaar, Donovan's fallen off a bit. I mean, he's been a good player this year, but offensively, he's not what we know him to be. Goldschmidt, Arenado. Like at some point, all of these guys not performing, you have to look at the hitting coach here. But I think it's too late for the Cardinals to, like, if the season ended today, they fired Turner Ward and said, let's run it back because we're going to blame the hitting coach. It's too late for that. They hitched themselves to that wagon here. They ran the show, and at this point, even if that's a change they need to make, if this is the direction the season is going to go, and there's still a chance it goes a different direction, I don't see how you can't make significant changes to the organization at this point. And even if they find a way to sneak in, I don't think you can get fans to buy into the 2025 Cardinals.
Yeah.
If they go on some like, hey, we snuck into the playoffs because we kind of just played 500 over this tough stretch, and then we took advantage of an easy schedule at the end, and then we got swept out of the NL wild card series. Like, I think the DeWitts have to look at it and it's like, hey, John Mozeliak, we don't necessarily blame you for the offensive struggles this year, but at some point, accountability has to be had. And this is your show you're running. 2 straight years of the deterioration. We know the long-term deterioration that's been happening. I think it's just time for some fresh blood. Otherwise, I don't think they're going to be getting the fan support that they want. And I don't even know if a shift, I personally think the more I've thought about it, if you make a change at the top, people are going to start being a little bit more interested to see, like, even if it's Chaim Bloom and he doesn't make huge moves this offseason.
I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like, what does he see in that random starter? Because maybe he actually thinks he could be really good rather than, oh, he'll eat innings for me and make the 32 starts. Like, I'll be intrigued by things just inherently because it's a different person in charge. And I think the DeWitts have to see that too. I can't help but think that they see all this discourse right now and know that it's a sinking ship. Yeah. But I don't know at this point. Like, we'll have to see. I already kind of thought the changes were going to happen this offseason, no matter what happened, in terms of making the playoffs or not. I think managerial change is one that I'm more open to now because I like Ollie. I know you. I think you've been a pretty big Ollie guy, at least in some extent. But at this point, if you're going to clean house, it kind of is weird to have a manager there that's not your guy. I just think there's significant changes coming. Otherwise, I don't think fan sport's going to be there anymore.
I think you talking about the DeWitts having to see the discourse and see the way and the trends and look, they probably feel it pocketbook wise too, because revenues are not going to be the same if there's not the fan support at the ballpark. That's something that's, and look, there's the rumblings at the deadline about don't take on future salary. And then like, what's the TV situation? So like all that's in play, but just from like a baseball standpoint, I think the person that sees it and could acknowledge that it's time is John Mozeliak.
Exactly.
Like, I've always said he won't be fired. I think it will be if you're Mo and you've had to go through this again and you couldn't fix it. Aren't you ready to tap out? You've had a great career, still a legacy that people aren't going to look at the end of your tenure with the Cardinals very fondly if this doesn't turn around. But there's still you can lot to hang your hat on, and there's no reason to do it anymore. Like if it's just not working, like he is self-aware enough, I think, to have targeted and help bring in Heimblum to say, let's get some outside voices to have some other opinions and stuff floating around here to see what we need to do to get back to having our edge as a franchise. So if they don't make the playoffs, I have said the goalposts aren't moving for me. It's the same as I said it was on May 11th. The change, you can talk about all you want, has to come from the top. Yep. There needs to be a change at the top if the Cardinals don't make the playoffs. Yep. Period. There's no spite in it. It's not I hate John Mozeliak. It's just what it is based on the performance on the field and the performance. I mean, there are so many ways that I think it goes deeper where you're like, how don't they have right-handed bats in Memphis that they can call up right now for the Jordan Walker role so that they can have their Jordan Walker number one prospect continue to let it cook and let it eat at Memphis so he can be ready to be great? No, they don't even have that right-handed Matt Koperniak, whatever that would be. That's what they need in this moment to call up Jordan instead of Jordan Walker so that Jordan Walker can continue doing what he does. But because they don't have that, and because the folks in the seats right now are desperate enough to try to win, that they're like, this is our best shot to maybe get a late inning at bat against a lefty. So we're going to take it, and it's going to be Jordan Walker. His progress as a player be darned. Like that's where they're at right now to me. So yeah, I think you just have to. I'm fine with them. I'm fine with them going for it right now and trying to do everything they can to win that day because you're still only whatever it is, 4.5, whatever it is out of a wild card spot. So it's not, all 4 games out of a wild card spot right now. You need the Braves to just choke. Like that's the only shot you have right now because I don't see the Diamondbacks or the Padres fading back to you. They might fade back to an Atlanta that comes charging. But you're 8.5 back from those two. You're the same back from those two as you are from the Brewers in the division.
Yeah.
So you're looking at Atlanta. If Atlanta decides to have a 600 winning percentage the rest of the season, Cardinals aren't making the playoffs. So that's just the reality of what it is right now. And then I also look at like, okay, if you really wanted to go for it, could you make a coaching change right now, this moment? Which if they were going to do it, would have been yesterday, and they didn't. And I said I don't think that's coming. I think you let it play out. Does that mean that you maybe have a lesser chance because there's no boost that sometimes can happen from changes like that propels this team for the next 6 weeks and you don't get that boost? So maybe they don't have what it takes. I think that's fine though. The boost should come from within. If it's going to be there, it's going to be there. I want there to be, at the end of this, there won't be any, well, we worked hard. It's like, nope, we gave you the whole runway for the season. We kept this coaching staff intact. I'm not talking about changing Ollie. I'm talking about the type of moves. Like if you're going to fire a hitting coach, May 11th might have been the day to do that, right?
Yeah.
People by then, though, were even saying, I think you have to fire the manager if you're going to make changes on May 11th that had gotten so bad. So I think those types of changes, I'm fine with them not making any of them till the end of the year. I think, all right, this whole group has earned the right from Mo on down. I'll finish this out. Try to fix it because stranger things have happened. If they fix it and they are the team that they told us they were all along, cool. But if they are not, then the changes to me have to come from the top down.
I mean,
and they will be sweeping.
And I totally agree that it has to come top down, sweeping. But even if it wasn't at the top down, at this point, like as a guy who supports Ollie and most of the coaching staff here too, like Mike Shell got fired after pulling off a 17-game win streak to make the playoffs. And I know there was the philosophical differences side of it. So speaking of the podcast.
But what does that mean though? It meant the philosophical differences between the manager and the front office that they didn't see eye to eye on everything. Yeah. I can't tell you that Ollie Marmol sees perfectly eye to eye with Jordan Walker coming up for this spot to like what is I don't know. It's it's very weird because his explanation of what has to be an outfielder that we bring up for Matt Carpenter, who's not an outfielder.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
The thought with that is, and I think if you piece it together, it makes sense, but it is still like there's enough weirdness. It's like, I don't really know if we're getting the full story necessarily, which is fine. Like a lot of stuff can stay internal, but it's just very strange. So specific to that though, when you think about the role that they are outwardly saying they want for Jordan Walker, face lefties, to get him in the lineup without removing another righty, it does have to be an outfielder. Because if it's Luke and Baker, you're playing him at first base for Goldie. That's not, I get it. Some people want that, but that's not removing a lefty to get a righty in there. It almost has to be an outfielder, unless it's Fermin and he's playing second base. But like we've seen that, and it's not, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in terms of getting that righty-lefty split on your major league roster. Walker is the bat that in theory could at least be productive and powerful and could add something. You have to remove somebody though. And when you're facing lefties, we know that they want Contreras DHing. So you can't put that guy DH either.
Yeah.
And if you don't want Pages in your lineup, that's fine. I'm not even here to argue about that. Let's just pretend Herrera is the catcher and they switch him. That's another way to get a righty in there and probably adds to your productivity because I think he is the better bat than Pages. I understand that you're letting people run freely at this point. I think you would, if it was Herrera instead of Pages, I think you would double the number of runners that try, and then the success rate would stay 100. I think Herrera is worse than Pages in that regard, but the fast runners are running and they're doing it freely. I get it. It would probably happen regardless. I think the slow runners would start running and do it freely with Herrera unless he has been making the strides that he needs to make in the minors, which I think might be a tough thing to do in season. I think he'll come to spring training next year, and that won't be a topic anymore. I think Herrera will have fixed that, and that will not be a thing anymore that will hold him back in his career. But I think that's why the Walker spot, Ollie said, has to be an outfielder, because if you look at the lineup, you're taking out a Gorman. Okay, Donnie moves to second. You can put Walker in the outfield. You're taking out a Donnie, Walker goes in the outfield. You're taking out a Nootbaar, Walker goes in the outfield.
Yeah.
You don't have that's where all your lefties are. So that's why it would make sense if you're actually going to use that righty that they called up, which was Walker. If you're going to use that guy against lefties, it almost has to be an outfielder. Otherwise, he's just another bat off the bench. And that, if that's what they would have wanted, that's fine. Herrera, Luke, and Baker, you could do that, and it would have had the same utility as Carp, but from the right side, which actually would have been somewhat helpful, especially if those guys have splits that say they're better against left-handed pitching. What bothers everybody about this Walker thing, other than you're stunting his development as he started to finally catch his stride in Memphis, is he's not better against left-handed pitching. So you're like, are you actually even gaining anything? That modicum of gain that you're potentially getting from this move at a risk of, guys, Jordan Walker was hitting his stride and now he's not playing. Now, would Mo look at that and say, Ollie, you could play him, but does Ollie look at that and say, does my daily defense, if I swap out Newt and I put in Jordan Walker, am I playing Tommy Pham in center? Because that's really almost what it would take to, because otherwise Victor Scott's in there and that's your other lefty, and that's not really helping you from this righty versus lefty thing. So that's the whole thing to me, is like, if there's not the trust factor from the manager in like, my outfield defense is going to be good enough that I can win that day, or I think Nootbaar is going to take a good at bat against a lefty because he's not overly splitty, so he might be better to win that day than Jordan Walker in there. From Ollie's standpoint, I can understand that. And that's, I'm not trying to say there's like some big tiff going on, but when I say philosophical differences, that's what I would be looking at, is like, does the Pobo see, hey, this could be something that they could do. I'll provide Ollie with this. But then Ollie's like, does Jordan Walker actually help me win that day? And that's what this is all about right now, because we told everybody we're trying to make the playoffs. So if you break it down, it's not that difficult to understand. But why is it a problem in the first place? Like I said, it's because you don't have right-handed Matt Koperniak in AAA. The issues with the big league roster and how the bench hasn't been that useful is a thing, but then it's almost extended beyond that to like, what's the second wave? What's the second wave for the rotation depth? What's the second wave? Yeah. We've had all these questions. Those aren't Ollie Marmol questions. Those are John Mozeliak questions. So for me, John Mozeliak he had a lot of goodwill and equity built up. He does not have enough to then fire another manager and pick his replacement, in my opinion. Yeah. I think if the changes are made this offseason, it comes from Mozeliak going, we gave it a good run. I think it's time for me to kind of step into a background role for the final year of my contract. And if it's Time Bloom or whoever it is, I'm going to give somebody else a crack at this. And it's done with dignity and everybody understands it. But that manager contract is in there. Ollie Marmol doesn't need to lose his job this offseason. I know that will drive people listening to me crazy, but I honestly think you bring in the new person that's going to rearrange. There will be some coaching changes, right? Hitting coach, pitching coach, and manager. Those seats all have to be up for discussion and reviewed, evaluate. However, you know what, whether it's Time Bloom or whoever it is, that individual should evaluate and have meetings with all the coaches and with his confidants, and he's going to hire his own people to bring in. And those people should have that conversation like, what do we view this as? But there are teams, and I'm not saying the Cardinals or the White Sox, but the White Sox knew they were going to be bad this year. So what did they not do? They didn't fire Pedro Grifol in the offseason because they're like, we're going to lose 120 games. They probably didn't think it would be that bad. We're going to lose 100 games. I don't want the manager that comes in to be responsible for that, right? Why would we want to hire somebody? Let's wait a year. Let Pedro Grifol eat it. If he happens to manage the hell out of it and get these guys rolling, then maybe he earns his job long term. But if he doesn't, which we don't think he will, then he's gone. I could see I don't think the Cardinals are going to lose 120 games next year. But if there are changes made, I could see Ollie Marmol, be told by a new exec that, hey, we're going to have to maybe switch some things around with the coaching staff a little bit, but have this runway. But we're also probably not raising payroll, and we're also you're going to need to do more with less if it's Ollie Marmol next year. And for me, I don't have a problem with the Cardinals doing that because I maintain that Ollie Marmol manages a really good bullpen, and there are things he does really well. And I think he could be a good manager still. Even I say this still as things are going poorly in the right circumstances. But I think he's been hamstrung a lot of this season by the roster that he's had. And like I said, I don't move the goalposts. I've said this since day one of the season. You cannot necessarily pin on the manager the things that are happening above his head, and he's just trying to grapple with and deal with. That being said, evaluate his role as well, because if this goes wrong, if this doesn't end up in a playoffs, he has not maybe maximized the roster that he's had too. So I'm not absolving him, but I'm also saying, like, I have a belief that the problems organizationally run deeper, and that I think Ollie Marmol. Now the thing is, if Ollie Marmol if it doesn't work out here, I don't know what his next step in baseball is. For Mike Shildt, it was wait around a little bit, have some goodwill. There was enough sentiment around the league that thought Mike Shildt kind of got the raw end of the deal with St. Louis, to where he had the sentiment around the league to give it a go. I don't know if it's going to be the same for Ollie if this comes around, just because, well, he was the youngest manager and maybe he was a little bit too. I don't necessarily have to think that for the league sentiment to be that. So I'll just be very interested to see what would happen there. But I do not think that a change at the top would necessarily mean a manager change. I don't think it has to. And I would understand if it wasn't. But in either case, I don't hear what I'm not saying, Cardinals fans. I do think every single thing, if this isn't playoffs, I'm a blanket statement, bottom line guy. Every single thing has to be evaluated, from the roster to the execs to the on-field coaching staff, because it's like Cardinals fans expect better, and they were told they were going to get better. So if they were told coming in like, hey, it's going to be lean, then it's like you change your expectations based on that. They said last year didn't count. We messed up, but we know how to fix it. And so we're going to see. That's why I'm so willing, maybe more willing than Cardinals fans who want blood and head on a stake today. I'm willing to say, let's see it play out, because if it doesn't play out the way they told us it was going to, end of season press conference or not, I'll know what I think of it. You won't be able to spin it in any sort of way. You won't be able to say, well, the injuries really got us at the end. No, before the end, you were not in a playoff spot. Like, it will be so easy to evaluate. It will be so black and white that I am ready to, and maybe for Cardinals fans, it's already there, because they're like, well, why shouldn't you just do it now? They're deep enough into the season that it should count. These games count. And that's fine. If it's because I'm too close to it and I'm like, no, I think these are good people that should get a chance to let it play out, then that can be my fatal flaw, and I'm okay with that and comfortable with that. But let it be known that when it's all said and done, if this isn't playoffs, I couldn't have been clearer about where I stand. I have not moved these goalposts. It needs to be top down, sweeping changes. There's no spite in it, like Death of a Salesman. There's no spite in it anymore. It just kind of is what it is. If you have 2 lost seasons in St. Louis, that under the build-to-win ownership has meant something. He's the one who said, at some places you can have 500 seasons, but it's different here. All right. Like, if that's true, I didn't move the goalposts, and neither should they. That's my rant. That's my thought.
No, I love it. And I agree with you that I don't think necessarily Ollie's job, let me backtrack. You cannot fire Ollie and keep John Mozeliak. They're tied to the hip at this point. If Ollie's gone, John Mozeliak is gone. I don't think Ollie has to be gone if Mozeliak is gone. I do think maybe an advantage of having Chaim Bloom kind of studying the organization this past year and coming in is he's not a fresh face who doesn't know anyone. He might already have an opinion on Ollie. Be like, actually kind of like this guy. So I'd be fine with him as my net manager next year. Let's see long term. I just think about a month and a half ago, I thought Ollie clearly was the manager for 2025. There was no shot that was going to be changed. Even if they didn't make the playoffs, I thought he had proven himself. But I do think with how poorly it's going again, I could see them just be like, hey, we need to wipe the slate completely clean. Even if we like Ollie, it's just at this point, optics, change of voice, change of scenery. Let's shake things up all the way through. But I don't necessarily think they need to do that either. But I 100%
They
agree
may
with you that
choose to, though. We don't know. We don't know.
yeah, we don't know. I just think it makes sense to me if they do that, but I would totally be okay with them keeping him. At this point, though, yeah, I mean, they're missing the playoffs, Mo, and I don't know what that means to the rest of the front office.
I
Like,
don't either.
what does it mean for Gersh? What does it mean for Flores? I don't really know.
And I
What
hate
does it
talking
mean for
about
Gary
people's jobs,
LaRocque?
by the way.
Yeah,
Like, but I think from a perspective of Mozeliak has been the constant, and he can hire who he wants. He can have. There's not anybody looking over Mozeliak's shoulder. Bill DeWitt's not looking over Mozeliak's shoulder. He trusts Mo implicitly, and that has been earned over the course of time. I'm not even disagreeing with that being the case. That's why Mo gets to decide when he leaves, even as this is going. I unless something drastically changed, and I don't think it has. That's still the case to me. So, like, when it comes to the entire front office, it's somebody else's turn, and Mo is going to want the best for everybody that he leaves behind, and he'll still. I think it'd be best case scenario for Mo to still be around.
Yeah,
Mo has that contract. I don't think he should be fired. I think he should just be in a different role if as the shepherd of this team and this organization on the baseball side, he doesn't guide them to the promised land for a second year in a row, which is just an NL wildcard appearance. I'm not asking for the world, but if people have talked about since 2015, the lowering of the standard, well, we used to pretty much make an NLCS appearance every other year. We were always in the LDS. Like, okay, I understand that. At this point, even just getting back to the playoffs, I'm willing to be the optimistic guy. I'm willing to say, hey, it doesn't take much for me to go, you know what? You've made good on your promises of kind of getting the Cardinals back to respectability. But if they don't even get to that point, I think you would. And look, we keep talking about Chaim Bloom because he's the one that seems obvious. They could go any other direction that they want to. I don't think you could promote from within from this front office and have somebody else be the head guy. Nothing against those guys, but I don't think the fans would necessarily accept that. If you're DeWitt, you have to understand that people are upset. People don't like the direction. They want to. It kind of makes me uncomfortable sometimes with, and I am not trying to denigrate fans in this regard, but like there's a lot of vitriol toward the Cardinals. And it's like the reason for it is because your favorite team is the Cardinals, and you want them to do very well, and it hurts you on a personal level because you feel so connected to the team when they are not doing well. But like it almost does make me feel a little bit icky because it's like the day the Cardinals are great again, you're going to be at that parade. You know what I mean? So it's like, but it's the desecration of the Cardinals brand that I feel like the fans have the issue with, and I support them in that, because if this is a team that's not making the playoffs and it used to be the pinnacle of the sport, that it's not the Cardinals that you hate and are spewing. The spewing of the vitriol, sometimes I'm like, this is still your team, and the people running your team are trying to get you that championship. They might not be well equipped to do it, and that's why I say I wish there'd be no spite in it. But we can evaluate it for what it is from a business standpoint and from a production standpoint. And at that point, we say thank you for the years of service, John Mozeliak. You are 3 to 5 years from your red jacket. But if they don't end up with this season ending in a playoff run, I do think that is where we're at. That's what you just have to say. I'm not hateful and spiteful about it, but can we be adults about this and recognize that maybe it's somebody else's turn? I think that, but I understand why fans can't talk that way, because it's like that's too civil of discourse to have. And I'm not even saying that in a mocking way. Like, I get it. You guys invest your whole summer in this product year after year. You, in the off season, you're waiting for this thing to come back to your lives. It's special. It doesn't feel special right now, and that hurts people's souls. And I get it, man. I do get that.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit you with some Dark Knight here. In the case of John Mozeliak, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain, and it feels like what's happened to Cardinal fans here. And I got ripped for it in our last episode where I talked about, like, you look at 2011 to 2015 Mo, and that's a master class. Like, I mean, besides the Giants, the Cardinals were the class in the national, not just nationally, class of baseball. They won more playoff games than any other team by a pretty wide margin over that stretch. They played in more playoff games than any other team by a wide stretch. What was it? 4 straight NLCS appearances, 1 World Series title. They lost the World Series to the Red Sox. Again, they blew a 3-1 lead against the Giants one of those years too. So they really should have went to another World Series. And I mean, I just got ripped to shreds for giving Mo some props there. But you look at early Mo, and man, like it's hard to ask for anything more from a baseball executive. The things that we potentially hope a Chaim Bloom can do, that was what John Mozeliak was doing. Player development was, you look at the Cardinals for the way that they develop pitching. They didn't necessarily have big bats outside of like an Oscar Taveras come up, but like Matt Carpenter popped out for them, right? And Alan Craig popped out for them. Like they were churning out talent left and right. They made smart free agent signings like Carlos Beltran, Lance Berkman. They made great trades like John Lackey. They left and right were killing the game. And then the Cubs kind of rose to prominence, and you can name all these different microcosm things. The Taveras death happened, and then they kind of freaked out a little bit there. Some of their pitching prospects, you kind of look through, and it's kind of wild how many of them, pretty much all of them, ended up with significant arm injuries that kind of derailed their career. A lot of these things happened, and a couple of them could have been weathered, but it seems like every one of these microcosms you can name, they went the wrong direction with. And then over time, they went from being a consistent World Series contender to a consistent playoff contender. And now they're looking like a consistent outside looking in team. And like you said, I don't think Mo needs to be fired. I don't think the pitchforks need to come out in the sense that we need to be kicking him out the door on the way out. I think it's perfectly fine if he steps into a new role and we fully acknowledge that, hey, your time it's over now and it's time to turn it over. We wish it could have ended better than this. And he had said almost 20 years in charge of this team. And if we go back to 2015 as the last of their prominence, it's been almost a decade that he's had to kind of turn this around. And I think it's more than fair to say, hey, we appreciate what you've done in the history of this club, and we don't have ill will toward you as an organization, but it's time to make the shifts. And to your point too, I think Mo's been leading the breadcrumbs for a while, right? He's been talking about, he thinks his voice maybe grows stale and you need to change some leadership at the top. He brought in a Chaim Bloom.
I mean, he gets where things are. He doesn't like it, but like, you'd have to be head in the sand not to see that the results have gone in a particular direction. So, and again, I am still, even today, leaving room, and people won't like that, but I'm leaving room for this Red Series to have been the kick in the pants that's like, and then you get an off day. I am assuming there has to have been some conversations that have happened in the, since that series ended with the team, whether that's group chats, team meetings, players only, whatever it is. It's like, guys, we're either going to do it or we're not. Backs against the wall. Let's go see. And that can be sometimes an inspiring thing that can rally a group together. But it comes from those personalities in that room, and like Ollie Marmol having whatever touch or wisdom he can impart to this, now would be the time to do it. And I'm sure those things are happening behind the scenes. And if it happens, and we're talking about a miraculous 6-week turnaround a la 2011, then great. And we're not having the same conversation. We're only talking about in these like 10,000-foot helicopter view terms about the organization and about maybe having a shift because of the record. The results are what matters. I'm not talking about it because the coaching staff isn't putting in enough work. I'm not talking about it because the players aren't working hard enough. That's not a thing that I think is happening. There are some people who would say and watch that Red Series and say, I think they don't care anymore. I think they've lost and that's always such a difficult thing to evaluate. Is it because you're not executing in your job and it looks like you're bad at your job? That means you don't care about your job. It in our world, it's like, well, if I didn't care, then I would kind of, be like, what's up, Josh? Like, what are we doing? But like, if you don't care in baseball, that sometimes can look like you do care, but you're just not executing in your job.
Well, especially when it's hitting
bad. You could go hit and be bad. You can very much care that you think this next pitch should be a home run for you, but instead you, for some reason, you were in your head too much and you thought it was going to be a slider and it was a fastball down the middle and a 3-2 count. You didn't swing.
Yep.
Does it mean you didn't care, that you weren't trying, or that you just weren't good enough that day? In this job, it is performance-based more so than a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs are performance-based. Don't get me wrong. There's pressure in this job. It's a very public-facing job. You have to deal with the stuff afterwards. A lot of us can go on Twitter and just kind of hang out on Twitter, and we don't have to look at, well, sometimes I get some nasty stuff in my DMs, but not anything like I bet the players do. And that's why some of them are like, I don't have social media. Are you crazy? I don't hate myself. Like, why would I? So it is different. And I think the characterizations of we don't try, we don't care, like that, I don't think is right, but I understand where fans get it, because when you're watching a team that's not hitting, you're like, well, it certainly looks like the demeanor of the team is down. And it looks like a lot of that stuff could be characterized as don't care, but we're talking about it because the Cardinals are 60-61. We're not talking about anybody's. I hate talking about people's jobs. we're not talking about it if it's not 60 and 61.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really the bottom line for me.
Yeah. And like you said, there's still an outside chance, right? They're 4.5 back in the wild card. I mean, they're a game below 500, which is just, it's wild that they're back there. But
Yeah.
the standings are really their calling card right now. It's really the hope that they have is that could the Brewers fall off? I'm becoming skeptical of that
You
one.
play them 6 times. I
Yeah.
mean, that's if you really want to. I didn't believe the folks a couple of weeks ago who said I'm looking more at the division than the wild card. I'm like, well, there's 3 wild card spots. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But then both the top 2 wild cards went 9-1. So now it's kind of like actually you have a better chance at the division than you do a wild card because you're 8.5 back of the D-backs and the other team, the Padres.
The Padres.
You're 8.5 back of the Brewers. So you only get to play one of those teams 6 times. You do play the Padres 4 times, but you play the Brewers 6 times. So take your shot against them, and that would be the one world in which you do probably have a chance. You go even 5-1 against the Brewers, you gain 4 games. You only have to outplay them by 4 or 5 games the rest of the way. So that's possible, and I'm leaving room for it. Before we leave, I want you to predict the Dodgers series. Let's see how optimistic you are, Joshy. What do you got for this Dodgers series? And let's read off the pitching matchups too, because that makes it even more fun. I guess the Dodgers have probably picked a pitcher by now. As of last night, they had. Nope, it's TBD.
Okay.
TBD. Well, Michaelis against TBD, and TBD is probably top 100 prospect that nobody's heard of, but they're about to. Palante v. Glasnow on Saturday night on Fox. Kershaw, Sonny Gray on Sunday. What do you got? What's the result of the series?
I'll say they take 1. But I want to say they're going to get swept. And I'm going to say that they take it against Glasnow because it'd be so Cardinals to win the game you don't think they're going to win. I don't think they're going to beat Kershaw because who trusts them to beat a left-handed pitcher? But it is Kershaw. Historically, they match Kershaw.
I would lead off Matt Carpenter, and I'm not joking. I would lead him off in the game. I know he's on the IL, but
they put a ghost IL stint for Brandon Crawford and bring back Matt Adams for the series and kind of see what happens for that.
Yeah, put him on a short-term list just to get Matt Adams in there for one. I was at that game, by the way. I was at that game as a fan. Yeah.
Oh,
that was 2014?
I think
it was.
Or it might have been 2013.
I thought it was because 13 they made the World Series. 14 this was.
Oh, I think
this was an NLDS, I believe.
Because it was NLCS in 2013 with the Dodgers.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So and then they lost, I guess, to who did they lose to in 14 in the next
the
round?
Giants.
That was the Giants because they were even years. I was trying to figure out. I was like, why? Oh yeah, even years for the Giants. Yep. So yes, I was at Mizzou. I was a student at Mizzou, and I was looking on like StubHub or whatever it was, and I was like, "Is a day game, like an afternoon game?" And I used to love those in the playoffs because the tickets were cheaper, and I was a college student, and I was like, And so I like texted my sister the night before. She was in Warrensburg, so she was like closer to Kansas City, and at UCM. And I was like, I'm thinking driving over for this game. And so she did. She drove to my apartment in Columbia, slept on the couch, and then we drove to St. Louis in the morning and, skipped my classes, whatever. And that was that. And that was the Matt Adams home run off a Kershaw game.
Yeah. Iconic. That's a good one to be at. So that's that. You got to keep that in your back pocket.
We end the show with some happy talk about the days of yore. The past Cardinals stuff.
Can I ask you? I mean, maybe this is something we can expand on going forward because we're gonna need stuff to talk about at this rate. Because someone asked me this for a Q&A episode we're doing. How if they miss the playoffs this year and sweeping changes happen, how soon can you realistically think this team is a playoff team again and a contender? I think you could. I mean, you see 1-year turnarounds like the Red Sox and Royals, so I don't think it's out of the realm. 2025, they can be a wild card again.
You need pieces. You need. I'm not trying to dog on the group that they have, but you need a mix of personalities that almost are going to have to be a little bit tweaked, like in the chemistry lab, just a little bit more of this. It's not even a little bit less of anything, but inherently you'll have to replace certain players to add players. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be the highest paid player of the offseason. The Royals added a Seth Lugo. Like the Royals were like, what do we need? Well, we need some reliable pitching. We've had all these young arms that they've graduated and we maybe mess up their development, and the new front office is trying to do what it can to salvage them, and they kind of did with like a Brady Singer this year. But like, what do we need? Go get Seth Lugo. We're going to pay him not like an ace, but he's going to pitch 8 innings every game, and he's going to have pride in doing it and like be great. So, and they didn't. It was like $15 million a year or something. I don't know what those moves are. I think it comes from a player being traded away, a position player being traded away that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they traded that guy. But it's just kind of just to shake up the deck a little bit.
Yeah.
Granted, that's going to be harder to do because if you had done it this last offseason, you would look at all the names that have years of control that, I mean, you could have. I don't know that maybe the Cardinals tried with Nolan Gorman, but the league was like, I don't know. I think he's going to break the strikeout record and maybe not be that guy for us. So I don't know what level to which they floated Nolan Gorman. But like if it was the Gormans of the world or the Newpars of the world, I still would not trade Brendan Donovan. But like if you're talking about those types of guys, which of them still have that level of value to where, because like it almost might have to take a new front office. We know how Mo trades and we know how he doesn't trade. And he's, but if it's somebody out unaffiliated, it's like, I just have to make some moves to kind of shake the deck a little bit. I think that could be something that we see. And I don't know. I don't know what happens. I think Goldie probably is not on the team, but if it's a new front office that says, hey, Goldie, I get it. You've been a long-time Cardinal, and we actually see a great role for you. You're going to play against lefties. Would he do that? Or does he want to go somewhere else where he can play every day to kind of prove that he still has it? Maybe they will extend Goldie that opportunity. I think if it's still Mo, you can't do the Adam Wainwright contract with Goldie because and even if it's the same manager, like if Ollie Marmol, it's like, hey, Goldie, you're not playing every day. Ollie Marmol is going to want to put Goldie in the lineup every single day because he knows what Goldie is capable of doing. It's like Matt Carpenter when he left and came back. Now he comes back and you can treat him differently because he knows his role. But can they do that with Goldie? Will they want to? I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I think the leadership of him there's a quality that you'd like to have around. It's going to matter the money. It's going to matter the role and like how you plan to replace that role. I think a Chaim Bloom-led Cardinals is going to have a roster that makes more sense because I think they're going to look at platoon splits and they're going to set up Ollie the way, or whatever manager is, the way the Rays are typically constructed, where it's like everybody kind of knows the deal.
Yeah.
Now, I think Ollie could be the kind of manager that could have those conversations and make sure guys understand their role because I think he is a good communicator with his players. I think he manages a good bullpen. I think he communicates well with his players. People are going to point to Tyler O'Neill and say that's not true. People are going to point to Dylan Carlson and say that's not true. He communicates well with most of his players. Okay, so I think that largely that could end up working out, but if it's a different manager or if it isn't, it's some moves that happen that make you go, the Cardinals need to look like the Rays. And the Rays aren't going to make the playoffs this year, we don't think. They sold at the deadline. But does anybody think that the Rays are going to be just terrible next year? Nope. They'll probably pull off some random moves in the offseason. They're not stagnant. They're not afraid to change the deck, to shuffle the deck. And the Cardinals deck just needs to be shuffled a little bit because it's gotten, I think, a little bit stale. But could that mean making it in 2025, even if the payroll goes down? It could. I don't know if there's a 40% chance or a 25% chance or a 60% chance. It's going to depend on a lot of what the actual moves are. But that's my opinion, is like, we did the episode in May, right? Where before we even started Philosophical Differences, I said you would be a good person to talk to about this because I think we're both going to have some interesting thoughts. And we did the whole episode on what could 2025 look like if this year doesn't go well. Yeah. And then we had a summer where the Cardinals were back and we were like, that's kind of back in the rearview mirror. And now we're back again. So like, what could happen if the season doesn't go well? The only difference is they waited until after the trade deadline to tank it. So they didn't end up trading at the deadline. They bought. That's the only difference from our May episode.
The buying moves, I mean, Carlson for Armstrong's, that's a move for this year, but like
Carlson is the only.
But Brenden and Fetty is a 2025 pro, even if he's not a number 2, number 3. I mean, $7.5 million for a back end starter is pretty helpful. So they smartly did not buy to a point where it was going to bite them like the Angels did last offseason or last
didn't
deadline.
Sell anybody. Didn't sell any prospects.
The selling major league talent is the one thing you can look back on and be like, oh, they could have maximized that, but they didn't give away prospects like you said. I will be, again, depending on how this next week goes, because they could be better, and we were talking about, okay, can they make it happen? Who knows? Assuming they're not, it'll be interesting to see, like, is it worth shuffling the deck for the sake of shuffling the deck with your young guys next offseason? Because, hey, like, at some point we got to get a new mix in here, so we're going to ship off Gorman or Newbar to make that happen? Or do you give the new regime a year to figure out what we have in a Gorman or Newbar before selling low on them? I think it's an interesting, like, philosophical thing they'll have to figure out, because it might help you in 2025 to shake up the group, but then you're opening yourself up to another Randy Rosarina type situation, right? Because you just, whatever they trade Gorman for, it feels like he'll be a little bit better than that going forward. I just don't see a team giving you adequate value, but we'll see on that kind of stuff. And again, there's still some baseball to be played, even with how not optimistic I feel about it right now.
I asked you what the Cardinals were going to do against the Dodgers. You said they'll take one. I think they'll sweep because we're putting this out there into the world, and we're going to look really dumb if the Cardinals sweep this series. So they'll sweep the Dodgers. You heard it here first. Starting tonight, Friday night, Michaelis shoves against the Dodgers. Retribution for what happened on opening day in LA. Shohei goes 0 for 13 with 8 Ks during the series. Now, that part's not going to happen. Shohei, over under 0.5 homers for Shohei in the series.
I'll give him the 1. It just feels
He's got to
like
get 1, right?
Yeah. Honestly, how ironic. It feels on brand for the Cardinals to go on a run like this where they're like, oh, it's all like doomsday, and then for them to sweep the Dodgers, and then
I'm
they
telling
like
you,
look like a dud the next series.
They're winning this. The Cardinals are winning this series. Maybe sweep is a little bit out there, but I think they'll be closer to sweeping the series than they are to getting swept.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I've seen stranger things, and I think that they are not thrilled with the way things went, and we see them sometimes jump out and do some things when we least expect it. So why not? I'll go down with this ship. The Cardinals are going to win the series against the Dodgers. There you go. All right, we'll leave you with that. Let your hate flow through you in the comments. I'm a moron. Josh is an idiot. We're the moron and the idiot here on Philosophical Differences. Every Friday, talking Cardinals baseball. You can subscribe to the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube channel to catch it. You can subscribe to Dealing the Cards. They've got live streams every Wednesday and Sunday that you can catch on Cardinals baseball topics, and also subscribe to b-schaeff Daily and Dealing the Cards on the podcast feeds like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, etc. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. We'll talk to you next time on Philosophical Differences. Peace.